Good afternoon, battlers, and welcome to the very first edition of Meta Minutes with Professor Willow. I am your host, Professor Willow, and we will be diving into the Silph Arena February Cup, which has been titled the Rose Cup. Now, guys, if you haven't had a chance to look at this graphic in the past 2-3 days that it's been out, don't worry, we're going to go through it pretty briefly, but first and foremost, put on those rose-colored glasses, battlers. Build your team with pink, red, purple, and gray Pokemon, and dazzle your opponent with the full spectrum of your skill. Mind those band types. Mythicals and Legendaries, Bastiodon, and Water types will not be joining your team this month. So guys, this is going to be the first Silph Arena Cup that deals with color as opposed to primary and secondary typing, which, guys, I'm so excited. The meta for this one has just kind of spontaneously already grown some rock, paper, scissors dynamics, and I'm so excited to be able to get to show you what I found so far. Lastly, before we delve into the actual meta minutes, shinies can't save you here. So the main thing that they want you to know, guys, is that these colors, the 4 colors that are acceptable under this meta, are actually going to be designated by Bulbapedia. This is going to help us out whenever we're dealing with Pokemon that have multiple colors, and there may be some issue as to whether or not they're accepted or not. So if you have any questions, you can either look at pvpoke.com, and there's an expansive list as far as the top Pokemon within the meta, and also you can also scroll on over to Bulbapedia to get their official single color designation. And with that, guys, let's look at it just a little bit deeper in our meta breakdown. So, as you can see, we're going to be diving into the Game Press graphic that was released a couple of days ago on Reddit. And first thing that came to mind whenever I saw this graphic is, oh my goodness, how in the world are we going to start doing team comp with this quadruple, oh my goodness, flowchart, Venn diagram? It's kind of all over the place, but I'm going to help you guys kind of sift through the menagerie and break it down into 3 main categories, which I believe are going to be our rock, paper, scissors meta this round. So let's start off by going over to PvPoke and looking at the current meta as is. And so if we go over to PvPoke, you can go into rankings. And from here, we're going to go ahead and select our Rose Cup. As we can see, we have a handful of typings that are kind of clustering this meta, but right here on the top, we have our big 4-armed fighting boy, the big old Machamp, your Raiders, 99% of the time. Yes, he is here. He is PvP relevant and without the legacy moveset. So the optimal moveset for this guy is going to be counter with cross chop and rock slide. So if you have that OG Stone Edge move in your moveset, that's great. I actually haven't had a chance to go through the sims to see if that's going to be preferable over rock slide, or what that play is going to look like if you have that legacy moveset. But first and foremost, we got to have that quick cross chop action, because guys, Machamp is a steamroller. If it's not an anti-counter, it is coming to eat your lunch, my tanky boys. So fighting is what has kind of led the meta in our first week. And so if we go back to our meta breakdown, that's going to be our first category for today, is counter users. Now we see that we have 2 currently on the screen listed as the primary holders of that role, and that's going to be Medicham with counter, Ice Beam, and close combat, and Machoke Machamp with counter, cross chop, and lastly that rock throw. I know we were just on it, guys, forgive me. But these guys, their primary use is to defeat the tanky Steel Boys. If it has rock, if it has steel, these guys are meant to take those guys out. They're quick, and usually demand at least one shield, but that is where we're going to kind of start off as our core aspect of our team building diagram. Now, like I said, these guys' main job is to take out this next group, which are our tanks. I know a lot of you guys are probably excited to see Steelix and Probopass up there. Probopass specifically because we just got done with the Fusion Cup where Probopass was all over the place. And guys, if you already did your ranked cup for Fusion early, you might already still have the correct moveset for Probopass, which according to PV Poke is Rock Throw, Rock Slide, and Magnet Bomb, which pre-Community Day for Empoleon would have been a excellent moveset to be running on your team. Now, if you're running that Spark Thunderbolt variant, say that you still haven't done your Fusion Cup and you're looking for that Empoleon counter, yeah, you may have to use a couple of TMs this round because it definitely needs that extra rock, extra steel action in this for the countering and coverage of the rest of the meta. Now, next to it, we see our favorite Iron Snake, our Steelix boy, has made a comeback using that classic moveset of Dragon Tail, Crunch, and Earthquake to provide the most utility damage across the board. And we can still see, as always, Steelix is going to outpace that Probopass, but these two, like our previous category, have different use depending on the different team comps that you predict. So either one will fit. It just depends on what else that you're bringing to the table. And we're already there, guys. Let's go ahead and jump into the maelstrom of the third and final category within our rock, paper, scissors dynamic, which are our anti-counterers. Now, guys, I'm probably going to do a secondary video just breaking down this category. Due to its complexity, we have some rock, paper, scissors within rock, paper, scissors action. We have rock, paper, scissors exception within the Rose Cup. But to sum it all up, their entire job is to keep a check on the counter users. They're going to be taking out those Metachamps, those Machamps, with ease in most matchups. So, without further ado, let's start in the top left-hand corner with Alolan Marowak. Now, Alolan Marowak is going to be using the same moveset that we've typically been using in the last couple of metas, which is Fire Spin, Shadow Ball, and Bone Club. And that is going to make him a formidable opponent, even when locked into some of those steel matchups with its fire-type fast move and quick access to moves like Shadow Ball and bait relationships with Bone Club. Alolan Marowak just keeps on coming as a utility player, meta after meta. I'm really excited to see how he's going to kind of function in with different team comps this year, and also to see if he comes back as a safe swap option. I think we're really early in the meta, so we can't exactly tell that just yet, but Alolan Marowak is going to be able to give you some tasty matchups with some of those tanks which would typically counter them. And also, it's going to be a great counter for our next couple, which are Skarmory and Golbat. Now, Skarmory has been dominant across, guys, I've lost count on how many metas that Skarmory has been just top dog or right there up there with every major utility mon within that current month's meta. It's back, guys. Same move set. We're going to want Sky Attack and Flash Cannon. on this guy for peak performance, and Skarmory is going to be able to take care of matchups like Golbat. It's going to be able to take on those bulky fairies due to its steel typing, and is also going to provide quite a bit of utility across the board with its flying typing towards the counterers. Now, as we move further to our right, we get into a little bit more spicy pick, Golbat, with Wing Attack, Poison Fang, and Shadow Ball. This flappy boy that attacked us all in every single cave that we went into in the main series games. Big Mouth Flying Boy is there to take care of the fairies because fairies do not like that steel and poison type damage. And let me tell you guys, you are going to need something to counter the fairies. Their heft and charm are going to hurt. Charm just rakes away just incremental chunks of your HP, and they are back and ready to attack this meta. Now your Charmers are also going to be able to cover the ghost types, but let's take a deeper look into the main charm options that we have. Currently on the graphic we have Wigglytuff and Clefable. Now this isn't to say Pokemon that are obviously pink like Gramble and Stubble aren't allowed. They're just a little glassy, especially given the prevalence of steel and poison typers in this meta. Granbull and Snubbull just can't exactly keep up, but I am anxious to be surprised if somebody's able to figure out some utility options or niche roles to facilitate those barking boys on their team. So right now, the reason we prefer these two are their heft and their quickness to get to their accessible movesets. First and foremost, the prioritized one, or the ones you should prioritize, would be Clefable. Clefable is running Charm, it's running Meteor Mash, and PV Poke says that you need to run Psychic with that, which I can see as kind of a one-shot for your fighters. Say you're swapping into a matchup that you know, you've got a Machamp that's got a couple of cross chops built up, and even though you resist that fighting damage, man, those suckers hurt. So you want to get rid of him quick, fast, and in a hurry. Don't necessarily want to do the farm down. Maybe you have a little bit of energy missing from your own HP. That's going to be your quick death charge move to release. But in the majority of the matchups, you're going to be using Meteor Mash. So that being said, I have gone over matchup, over matchup, over matchup. And currently, I have not found a matchup where Clefable doesn't farm down or exclusively use Meteor Mash. So, I'm going to say, currently within this early meta, that don't necessarily focus on if you have to TM Psychic onto it, you don't have say you have Dazzling Gleam as your second charge move. Let's wait for the meta to develop before you fully commit those rare and delicious TMs towards Clefable, because right now I believe it's pretty solid with just Meteor Mash alone. Now let's look at Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff has been used quite frequently as well in the last couple of metas, specifically in Fusion Cup due to its anti-flying advantage, and it's going to be the same moveset that we've been rocking for the last couple of months, which is Charm, Ice Beam, and also Play Rough. Now, Wigglytuff will take an L to Clefable. Clefable has Meteor Mash, so definitely a counter to its own typing, and it hurts. It hurts a lot, guys. So, but Wigglytuff does have its own niche relationships. The only thing that seems to be holding Wigglytuff up is a resistance issue, because Wigglytuff is normal and fairy, so it is only going to be taking neutral damage from those fighting type moves, as opposed to resisting them as what its brother in Clefable would be producing. So fairies, don't sleep on them this meta, guys. They're definitely going to be loud and proud, and giving Hades to the rest of this circle that does not bring steel or poison type moves. And they're going to be covering the ghost. They're just going to tear up through them, guys. I don't know if you've ever been locked in on a ghost type matchup with a fairy in charm. It is bye. Just bye. So the three main ghosts that are recommended in their own little rock, paper, scissors triangle are Drifblim, Haunter, and Sableye. Now, there are some more notable picks. Gengar makes the list as well as, of course, Drifloon being the pre-evolution of Drifblim. But neither of these, in my opinion, currently are going to be able to, quote, hold a candle to these other three, just due to things like Haunter's speed on being able to access moves like Shadow Punch and Shadow Ball, and also your Sableye being able to have that dark attacking to facilitate both being a ghost and countering the rest of the ghost. And of course, now we have one of the spiciest moveset switches that I've seen in a while, which is Icy Wind got the debuff. So whereas the previous metas, let's say for instance Sinister, where we were all running Drifblim with Hex, Ominous Wind, and Shadow Ball, we're now going to be shifting over to Shadow Ball and Icy Wind because of that rich, beautiful attack debuff that really holds Drifblim as a firm contender in this meta. It is one of the main counters towards a very tasty pick that we'll get to in just a second, which is Gliscor. So, as you can see in the bottom and middle section of our graphic, Haunter is going to outpace Drifblim. Sableye is going to hurt it with that foul play, dark typing. So it definitely has a very difficult road whenever it comes within its own circle of the anti-counters. But I'm sure that paired with the right team as far as tanks and counters are concerned, that Drifblim is definitely going to be a definitive meta pick within this current season. The moveset on Sableye needs to be, I believe it's Snarl, Ancient Power, and also Foul Play, and then Haunter we've already gone over. So now let's move over to our sidebar as kind of an extension off of our Drifblim conversation. And the first thing that we're going to look at our Scorpion group. This is Gliscor and Co. These are poison type users that also have access to ground type moves or vice versa. And guys, let's go back to PV Poke for just a second because you're not going to believe it if I don't show you. So on PV Poke, we have Gliscor, and let's look at the moveset here. First, it's going to ask for Fury Cutter, Night Slash, and Earthquake. We all know Night Slash got a neat little move change here within the last couple of months, and Earthquake is definitely going to be bringing the Pound Town to those Steel-type attackers and our Fire-type users as well. And we see some of its key matchups: Alolan Marowak, Steelix, both the Fighting Boys, and Rhydon. And like I said previously, Drifblim and Drifloon are some of the main counters to this Pokemon. Now, these relationships are highly bait dependent, but there has been a rise from the footage that I've been seeing of a Night Slash spam, just because Fury Cutter, man, it allows you to charge those moves so quickly. Next in that category was Nidoking, preferred moveset being Fury Cutter, Earth Power, and Earthquake. This will be the same recommended moveset for the Legacy that we were using in Ferocious Cup, unless you decided to run Poison Jab. But I believe everybody that needed to run Poison Jab because of lack of the Legacy Fury Cutter ended up switching over to Nidoqueen. in that meta. So if you have one built, guys, it's going to have positive relationships with, of course, both of the fighters, Wigglytuff, Steelix, and Probopass. So these guys kind of float as a check to both of the counter users and the tanks, but as you can see over here, get beat out by the anti-counterers more often than not. The last one that we'll go over in this category is Drapion, which I'm really excited to see how Drapion plays out this meta. Drapion, it seems to be a Swiss Army knife of typings based off of its moveset. This month, we're going to be running it with Bite, Fell Stinger, and Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail being super important because, of course, water types being banned this month is going to put some serious pressure on the on the fires, and also the rock and ground type users within the meta. And the high spammability due to Drapion's ability to harness Bite will allow us to put some serious pressure on those other two categories. Key matchups with it are Marowak, Charizard, Haunter, Sableye, and Drifblim. So it is definitely a good pick. I would not sleep on this matchup as well, but its top counters are going to be our counterers, Wigglytuff, and Steelix. So, going back to our next category, we'll be shifting over to our ground type, rock/ice types, I should say. These guys' main job is to put pressure on the ground type attackers, the rock type attackers. Rhyperior and Rhyhorn have a very unique role in the fact that they have access to Surf this meta with a high spammability point with Mudshot, or in Rhyperior's case, having Smackdown as a great anti-flyer option and just brutal to anybody that gets locked into that match without a typing resistance. We've also seen a resurgence with Glalie, Solrock, and Magcargo. These groups right here, they're going to put unique pressure on a lot of the relationships in the anti-counter category. And we'll probably do a little bit more explanation on these as we move forward with our second video in the series that'll break down the anti-counterers more in depth. Next category we're going to look at is the poison type users. Of course, as I mentioned before, these are going to put major pressure on our fairy types. Moth, Rix, Haunter, Plume has Razor Leaf, Muck has more play into Skarmory, all handle fighting and fairy. Dark and poisons don't necessarily, but they wall the ghost. Drapion once again has a very excellent moveset to be able to fit into this meta. I'm not necessarily against the poison types right now. I feel like it's really early meta, and so with fighters coming out strong as a lead within the Rose Cup, immediately we saw our fairy types to counter that. I think that as we progress further on into like week 2, week 3, that we'll probably see a resurgence of these poison type users just because of trying to counter those fairy types kind of taking a dominant role within the meta. And lastly, we have our spicy steels and our fire types. These spicy steels are alternative steel types. Don't replace the main ones, but can give you an added bit of secret sauce for the flair. Specifically, if you look at Ferrothorn, one of the very few grass attackers outside of Vileplume in our last category that will do massive damage to those rock and ground type users, and just wreak havoc on the fairies as well. Just great overall options, but glassy. Very glassy. Wormadam Trash Form is making a resurgence, of course, to cover those fighting types. And also we have, and I'm going to pull up PV Poke one more time because I know that I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. It's a new one from the Unova region. Escavalier is popped in, so if you have gotten that Law of Surprise, those Carablasts, and have been able to trade it with a friend or have the 200 rare candies on hand, this guy is making kind of waves within the meta. He's ranked 45 right now, but could see some use a little later on as those spice picks tend to come out in week 2 and week 3. But the moveset you're going to want to see on him is he's also going to function as a counter user. With access to Drill Run and Aerial Ace. Drill Run to cover some of your rock-style relationships, and Aerial Ace to have a combat against the counter users as well. But that being said, I don't think he fares well in any of those matchups, so it's going to be very dependent on the rest of your team comp around this new Snail Lancy boy. With that, let's move into our last and final category, which are our fire types. The fire types are going to be great counters to the steals as it hits them for super effective damage. The Charizard got in based off of its color on Bulbapedia. I don't know about you guys. Don't see any pink, don't see any red, I don't see any purple, and I don't see any gray on that guy. So once again, if it can be included, Charizard will be included, as all things Pokemon. But don't sleep on Charizard, guys. He does major damage to a lot of the anti-counterer line, and based off of its flying typing, has very great matchups with the counter users as well. But as we all know, Charizard needs a shield, so if you're planning on adding him to your team, be sure to put a lot of those defensive users or highly ranked defensive users within PV Poke. That way, if you need to share a shield, you have one available for him. Now also we have Blaziken down here. Now I would classify Blaziken's role as a counter user, primarily because its moveset is counter Blast Burn and Blaze Kick. It has some great matchups with the steel types, but gets outpaced by quite a bit of the meta. Just due to how glassy its defensive stat is. And we still also have Sunny Form, Cast Form with that Weather Ball damage and Weather Ball spam, which could see a rise as we, like I said, go closer towards week 2 and week 3. So here's what I've thought as far as basic team composition. Start off with your pick on your counter user. So I'm going to say right now I haven't seen a need for Double Fighter. Something that I'm sure we'll probably see quite a bit of testing around with as the meta develops, but pick for now one fighter, either Medicham or Machamp. Go into your tanks and pick one of those as well, Steelix or Probopass. So my personal picks so far have been Medicham and Probopass. And then you get into your anti-counterers, in which I'm going to say reserve one of your slots for a fairy. Pick a Wigglytuff or Clefable, then come in and find a counter for your fairies outside of your tanks. In this case, I picked Skarmory just because I'm familiar with it. I understand the move sets with them, and it's definitely a comfort slot for me, but that is subject to change. And then I picked a Ghost to kind of round it out as my 5th pick, which is Sableye, to kind of give more pressure towards those counter users. And last, as kind of my spice and safe swap utility pick, I'm going to run with Gliscor. So that's week 1. That's a quick little meta breakdown. I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. If you like this content, if you want to find more PvP breakdowns, shoutcast, and meta insights as the months go on. Go ahead and give that video a like, smash that subscribe button and the notifications as well. That way you will be the first to know whenever we have another meta breakdown. And with that, guys, thank you for your time, and I'll see you guys in the next one.